Hospital is going to serve the whole of Doha and areas around the city. It's a large new psychiatric hospital catering for forensic patients and for acute mental illness. Our vision for this project is to try and make an environment that will help respite and recovery, and that's through a range of settings that people can occupy, from inpatient accommodation through shared activity spaces, and then a broader landscape that they can actually aspire to moving away from their individual rooms and then finding their way out into the landscape and then out and home. And that's the vision. Whether we manage to achieve it through the built form only is another question, and it will depend on whether the client and the people who use the buildings go through the sort of changes they need to in order to work in the sort of 21st century milieu. We won a competition, and we're waiting to hear how we might take the project forward and what sort of procurement route this project should go in. And we think that it's going to go in a sort of design, construct, fast track route, and that probably isn't the best way of procuring a modern mental health facility. Well, I think in a sense what we've gone back to is the idea of the golden age of Islamic thinking and philosophy, and that goes back 1,000 years when people, when they first conceived of a psychiatric hospital in the Middle East. It was the first psychiatric hospital on the planet, and so a lot of the thinking that went into that, humanistic thinking, attitude to science, we've tried to emulate, or at least acknowledge and respond to in our project. We've tried to normalise an environment which is actually a bit like an urban development within that kind of climate, and so we've looked at closely packed buildings with courtyards, space outside the wards and the inpatient areas that people can actually move freely into. So the idea of expanding the domain and allow people to find their own way in a more familiar setting, and the idea that we can use nature, the Paradise Garden, for instance, the idea of healing and life force in the building. So we've embedded gardens in the building, and with the idea that those gardens will create a reduction in temperature, extend the seasons, and allow people to use outdoors as much as they can indoors, rather than sealing them up in air-conditioned boxes. Actually, thinking about how we've engaged with stakeholders in the past, a lot of our initial discussions or interactions or even introductions have been at conferences. And so, say a year before a project might be going ahead, we've actually been in front of a client, a potential client, at a conference, or we've been approached by clients after conferences to come and talk to them. And then when they are thinking about a real project, they then got back to us. So the conference setting is actually extremely important for bringing out new ideas, and you can actually find good clients by being open, honest and transparent about what you do, what you can offer, and if they like what you're saying or what you're presenting, they will come to you. So actually, I mean, in a sense, I find the conference setting a really good way of engaging initially with stakeholders. Once you've done that, you then have their confidence, and when you then get in front of them later on, perhaps in a real project, you've already broken the ice, so to speak, so they understand your philosophy, your starting point and your direction of travel, and they've already, if you like, chosen you because they think that you're going to be going in the same direction. So actually I could cite several projects or several clients where we've actually found them at conferences. I think that when we start every project now, and when we talk to clients, we actually talk about patient-centered care, but we know that actually most hospitals and most hospital settings are not really designed for patient care at all. At least the talk says they are, but the walk shows demonstrably that they're not. People are very good at talking about their aspirations and their desires in terms of hospital design. I think that actually the evidence is we're still not building environments which are good enough or patient-centred, or actually that really do embrace families or support and carers into the buildings. So that they're still designed for clinicians, and we're still designing in the old paradigm. So I think, again, the conference setting is an area where you can actually debate these kinds of ideas and start to get people listening and then maybe changing their minds. If they hear things enough in a sort of neutral setting, so outside the environment of a project or where you're having to engage with a client, in a place like this, people can actually be more open and be more discursive about new ideas.